Hello. I want to welcome back Carol Ponton and Matthew Hill to talk about Social Security disability benefits. Carol and Matthew have written a book entitled Ultimate Guide to Winning Your Social Security Disability Claim. Carol, Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thanks
for having us.
Let me start with this question. Tell us what inspired you guys to write this book?
Well, our firm's been representing the disabled for over 30 years now. And we've seen lots of mistakes that claimants make and problems that they have getting their benefits. There's all kinds of loopholes, unfortunately, through the bureaucracy. And this is just an attempt on our side to kind of help educate people who are trying to get those benefits that they've earned by paying into the system.
And also to let them know what benefits are available. There are a lot of people who have no idea they're entitled to disability benefits. And so this guide tries to tell them the different areas that are available to them.
Well, speaking of qualification, tell us who can qualify for Social Security disability benefits?
It's amazing. If you're disabled, just about anybody can qualify with certain guidelines.
Okay.
For instance, I think everybody or most people know that although I have to say, when I graduated from law school, I didn't know anything about Social Security disability benefits. And I discovered that under the retirement, the Social Security system, you can also get disability benefits if you become disabled and you've been working and paying Social Security disability benefits. But the other thing is that there are lots of other benefits out there. For instance, there's something called SSI, Supplemental Security Income, for people who have never worked. So say you have a child that's born with severe Down syndrome. If that child qualifies because they're disabled, and then the SSI is a financial tool. So it says if your family makes less than a certain amount of money, then you can get benefits. When that child turns 18, and that child is still disabled, they can still get benefits because it's based on their income. They're their only family.
I see.
And then when their child's parents retire or become disabled, they can get benefits off of their parents' account as well. And then there are widows' benefits. There are just a lot of benefits out there that people have no idea are available to them.
Well, what are some of the common misconceptions that you see on the part of the general public?
Well, I think one of the things is they think that people really aren't disabled. I think that with all things there are abuses, but I can tell you that does not happen. I have not seen that happen where we are, because you have a system where the government looks at all of the medical records and sometimes meets with the person. If they don't win at the initial levels, they actually go before a judge, and that judge talks to them, the judge sees them, they read the medical records, and I find none of these people take their jobs lightly. They realize the Social Security Trust Fund is for all of us, and if you abuse it in any way, it hurts all of us. So I read these things in the paper. I know that sometimes that exists, but I don't see it.
And the government also sends people out for their medical exams too, so they take it very seriously. They have their own examiners.
Well, are there different programs and benefits?
Absolutely. So like I said, there's a program for people who have worked, and then there are programs for people who have never worked. Under those may be a widow. Say that a woman has never worked, because that's more common in our society, and her husband dies. If she is between the ages of 50 or 60, 50 to 59, and she's disabled, then she can get benefits off of his account.
I see.
And just like I was saying earlier about children, it's sort of like the system was set up as we have our society. So if I get married, then all of a sudden we are responsible for each other, not my parents. So a child who is born disabled, that child is still under his parents. And so the system of Social Security runs to him or her from them.
Okay. Since children can't work, how does Social Security figure out how much they can get?
Well, the children get benefits because they're disabled. Okay, and there's and that's called the Supplemental Security Income System. Okay, and by the way, this is where people get really confused. For Supplemental Security Income, you have to show you're disabled and that you meet a financial criteria. In other words, you don't have more than a certain amount of assets or income. For regular disability, for people who have worked and paid in the system, there's no asset, there's no income. You can be a millionaire and get your benefits. It's just whether you worked and became disabled. So, but people get confused. They think, well, you need the income test for everything. That's not true. The income test is only for people who have not worked.
I see.
Okay? So whether that's a child or someone who was never capable of working. So you have supplemental security incomes for children that last until they turn 18. And the entitlement is based on their disability and their parents' income. So when they turn 18, they're reevaluated again because their parents' income is not theirs. They are their own individual household. So children who have not been able to get benefits when they were 0 to 18, all of a sudden qualify. And a lot of parents don't realize that.
Okay.
They've gone in, they've tried.
I was going to ask you to add that. Is that automatic?
It's
Does that
not
just happen in the
automatic. You
system?
have to go in because I had a parent who was a lawyer. He was making plenty of money. He looked into the SSI system when his child was born because he was definitely permanently disabled. He didn't qualify because the father made too much money. As soon as the child turned 18, he was entitled to benefits because his income, and which was his own household now, was under the amount. This father didn't know that. So he continued to support his child until he went to retire, the father. And when he went to retire, the Social Security system said, "Who's living in your home?" And he says, "My wife and my 40-year-old son." And he asked, "Why is he there?" And he says, "He's disabled." Is he getting benefits? No, he's getting nothing. So for the first time, the child was entitled to SSI, the supplemental security income. But the other income that he should have been entitled to, which was very difficult for us to prove, but we did, was disabled adult child.
Okay.
The difference is for the SSI, you can only get up to about $700 a month. For a disabled adult child, you can get half of your parent's income from
Whoa.
Social Security. So if the parent is getting, say, $2,000, you could get $1,000, plus you're entitled to Medicare. So it's a very important benefit.
Does Social Security monitor what the money is spent on?
Absolutely. Every year, there has to be a separate checking account.
Okay.
And every year, the parent has to come in with that checking account and go over it with the Social Security personnel. And they have to show it's used for therapy or something that is specifically needed for that child.
I was going to ask you, what do you have to prove in order for a child to get disability benefits?
You have to prove it's not the same as proving an adult is disabled. They actually have a list of impairments that if you meet this impairment, they consider you disabled. So it's a harder test than it is for someone who has worked and paid into the system.
If you just joined our program, we're here with attorneys Matthew Hill and Carol Ponton, and we're discussing their book, Ultimate Guide to Winning Your Social Security Disability Claim. Can you give me some examples of why a child might be found disabled?
Cerebral palsy is a good one.
Okay.
Children that are born with cerebral palsy, they cannot control their movements. A lot of times they can't think, they can't talk, they can't dress themselves. They're totally helpless. They're in a wheelchair and they have to be cared for.
Right.
A couple others that we see, unfortunately, are autism, Asperger's syndrome, other slow learning disabilities like Carol spoke to, but disabilities that keep the child behind the same child's rate of education or understanding, intelligence, similar age.
But they are more severe than an adult would have to have, is the way that I would. For an adult, you have to show that the Social Security system puts out a list of disabilities. If your ejection fraction from your heart is 30% or less, you automatically meet that if you're not working, okay? Many people don't meet the listing, but they are disabled. And so you will have their doctor say, because of this problem, they are limited in their ability to walk, stand, or sit, or they're limited in their ability to think and follow directions. The SSI program for the children does not have that second option, limitations. They have to either meet this list of disabilities or they're not qualified.
There's really no gray area. It's black or white.
So it's a pretty severe and profound disability.
Does a child get health insurance if they're found to be disabled?
Well, that's a good question. Under the SSI, all they're entitled to is what's called Medicaid, okay? And when they become 18 and they get SSI on their own, it's still Medicaid. But if they're able to get the disabled adult child through their parent, then for the first time they're qualified for Medicare, which is often a much more beneficial insurance for them.
Now, what happens when the child turns 18 and becomes an adult?
Then they are requalified again. They have to go through a medical exam to make sure that they're still disabled, and then the financial test is based on their income, not their parents, for the first time.
But again, that's not automatic.
It is not automatic. They're actually reviewed, and they actually go through a doctor examining them and specifying which rating they meet and why.
Okay. So their benefits are stopped then?
If they don't meet that qualification, yes, they are. Now, usually that doesn't happen because in order for the child to have gotten benefits in the first place, they had to be pretty severely disabled.
What do you need in order to prove a claim for a disabled adult child versus a minor child?
That's the problem, in that you have to show their disability, they met the disability requirements before they turned age 22. When you have a child, you're evaluating it as they are now. And of course, that's all medical. You have to have medical records to support that, which can be psychiatric, which can be physical.
If a disabled child later becomes entitled to disabled adult child benefits, does the benefit amount change?
If they've been on SSI and then they later are qualified for disabled adult child, it depends. If, say, their parent's benefit is $1,000, they get half of that, so they would get $500.
Okay.
They would still be entitled to $200 approximately from SSI, so they would be getting benefits from both systems. But say the parent is getting $2,000 a month, then the child's benefit is $1,000. They would no longer get the SSI. They'd be getting all their money from disabled adult child.
Does this benefit affect their parents' benefit?
No.
It doesn't. Okay.
No. And that's another thing I would bring out. It's not about children, but I'd bring about widows or retirement. Say a person has been married several times, and they have, and they retire. If you've been married to someone for 9 years or more, then you're entitled to benefits off of their account if it's more than your own account. What I'm trying to show is there's a myriad of ways you can get benefits.
Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons we wrote the book, because it's very hard to figure out where you fit in the system. The saddest thing to me is I see so many parents who have taken care of their child all along while they worked because they haven't qualified for the SSI. And then
while they were minors.
While they were minors. Then they don't know about the change. And so they continue to take care of their child until they're either disabled or retired and can no longer do that. So they've missed years of opportunities with help from medical care for the child, with money to help for their particular needs. Most of the time, the child is in their late 30s because that's when the parent comes in. I've had a number of cases where the parents show up and we've got to go back 20, 26 years.
If you just joined our program, we're here with attorneys Matthew Hill and Carol Ponton, and we're discussing their book, Ultimate Guide to Winning Your Social Security Disability Claim. Why would you apply for a disabled adult child's benefits if you're already on SSI?
Because there's a big difference. SSI is a program that you get because you're disabled and because of your financial situation, okay? So the most you can get is $700 a month. It's very hard to live on that. Disabled adult child can give you half of what your parent is getting, which can be a lot more. $1,000 is a lot more than $700. It can be more than that. Plus, you get Medicare insurance as opposed to Medicaid.
Okay.
It's very difficult to find providers that will take Medicaid.
Right.
And so to have that, it doesn't sound like much, but it's extremely important from the insurance side.
And the law has changed now as far as medical benefits, but for years, how were these people going to get their child insured? There was no insurance for them.
Right.
So that's an enormous benefit.
What if you're denied because neither of your parents are deceased, disabled, or retired?
That's a basic qualification that you have to meet to get disabled adult child. You can continue to get the SSI disability, but not the disabled adult child.
Once you're eligible, will Social Security pay you all the way back to when you were 18?
They'll pay you to when you applied.
Yeah, that's
Well, actually,
a year back.
A year back.
Still, like the individuals who apply in their 40s or late 30s, I mean, those were benefits that essentially they were entitled to but never got.
Well, like, for instance, this person that came in whose child was 37 or 40, I can't remember now, he only got benefits from the day he applied. So the day he walked into that office and found out that his son was entitled to him, he got benefits then for SSI. SSI starts the day you apply.
Okay.
The other disability can go back as far as a year.
Okay.
If you prove you were disabled back then.
Okay.
But no, he didn't get paid back to age 0 or 18 or 23.
Does Social Security ever review people, or do they just get benefits for the rest of their lives?
They're always reviewed. Everyone is reviewed, and the way they're reviewed is based on Social Security's impression of their disability. Is there a likelihood of improvement? How good is that likelihood? Or is there really no likelihood of improvement? So you go from a 1-year review up to as much as 7 years to review, but they are all reviewed.
What does Social Security look for when they review a person?
Well, they send them forms, and the forms will say always, has anything changed significantly in regard to your health, in regard to the reason you're disabled, and are you working? If a person is working and making over a certain amount of money, it doesn't matter what their disability is, they're not disabled under the government system. So you have to be disabled and not working.
Okay.
Okay?
And so, one thing we found is that when people are approved, it's almost like you can see their shoulders relax and they feel like they finally got through the system. But one thing we try to communicate and educate with our clients is it's not over. When you go to the doctor, you need to kind of record why you went, what was going on, so that if Social Security orders all your records and they're seeing from your doctor, oh, patient has improved or he's doing better today, when in reality that might have been your best day of the week. It's just important that they realize that they need to continue to monitor themselves or to make sure their medical records reflect what they're going through.
I see. What happens if Social Security finds a person is no longer disabled?
That's a cessation. They will send them a letter saying, we find that you are no longer disabled as of, and usually it's like the end of this month, and you will not be entitled to benefits. We're going to review you. Now, the person can choose to continue their benefits through a hearing before a judge.
Okay.
And the Social Security system says if we find ultimately that you are no longer entitled, you have to pay that money back. Oh. They can also continue their medical coverage. Okay, so the person has the option of doing either one of those or both. And then they actually go through the system sort of like they did initially. They have to go in and prove that they're disabled.
Is there an appeal?
It's recreating. They have to do the whole thing again.
Right.
Be an appeal. Yeah, you can be denied once, then twice, and you go through a judge again.
Okay. So a person can't get back onto their benefits.
Yes, they can defeat that. But they would have to come in with medical evidence and proof that they haven't worked and that their disability still meets the system.
When your benefits start, do you also get health insurance right away?
No, the health insurance, well, it depends. The SSI program, it starts right away. But for Medicare, you have to usually wait. When you get Social Security disability benefits, there's a 6-month wait before you get your first check.
Okay.
You're not entitled to a check until you've been out of work for 6 months. The medical benefit starts 2 years from that time.
And so essentially 6 months, you can, it's the date of application. If you hadn't worked 6 months before that, then you got your date of application. So you apply here, you don't win until 2 years later. Well, it goes back to the date of application. So the 2 years start the date you apply or the date to which you're entitled, not necessarily the day you win. But the exceptions are.
I said that wrong. Yeah. Right, it's 2 years from your first entitlement to a check, and you're only entitled to a check 6 months after the date they found you disabled.
Yeah. If you just joined our program, we're here with attorneys Matthew Hill and Carol Ponton, and we're discussing their book, Ultimate Guide to Winning Your Social Security Disability Claim. Now, I don't think we talked about widows' benefits. Can we elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. Widows and widowers' benefits are paid if someone is married to a person at the time of their death, or they've been married, I think it's 9.5 years, and they have to show they're between the ages of 50 and 59 and that they are disabled, that they meet the Social Security requirements for showing that they can't work. Okay?
I see.
So you have, and why does it go 50 to 59? Because at age 60, you're automatically entitled to early benefits under the widow or widower's claims. So the disability lasts from age 50 to age 59. So say someone is 45 when their husband or wife dies. As soon as they reach age 50, if they can't work, then they can apply and get benefits under their spouse's account.
What about other benefits for adults that have worked?
Well, we really haven't talked about disability insurance benefits, which is the classic one, in that, and that's where the claimant has worked all his life, paid taxes, paid into the system. And again, that goes back to what Carol said, in that if the person becomes disabled for any reason and cannot work, then they're entitled to those benefits, no matter, past age of 18, no matter what, because they paid into the system.
Right. Okay. How long does a person have to work in order to get benefits?
Well, 5 out of the last 10 years is the rule. But if the person's under 30, then there's a reduced amount that they have to work. Kind of the closer they get to 18, the less they would have had to work.
So in other words, Social Security realizes that a 24-year-old probably hasn't worked 5 out of the last 10 years. So they give these people that are under 30 a reduced amount of time that they have to work in order to qualify.
I see. So how long after you stop working should you apply for benefits?
Immediately. You should be applying when you know you're stopping working, just so you can get the maximum benefits you're entitled to.
And the other thing is Social Security takes quite a while. It can take 2 or 3 years for them to finally approve your case. And the longer you wait, the longer it's going to take to get your benefits.
Exactly.
Now, if someone's denied, should they reapply?
Well, it depends on what you mean by denied. If, we talked about there's 3 steps to the process. If they're denied at the first step or second step, no, they should keep appealing. But if they get denied by the judge, then yes, they should reapply if they feel they cannot work.
Okay. If they've been out of work for, say, a couple of months, should they still reapply?
Well, I would say that if they believe they're going to be unable to work for 12 consecutive months, then they should apply. But if they're out of work just for a couple months, then no, they wouldn't qualify.
And sometimes, though, they have to really think about it, because there have been people who assumed they would get better, but they didn't. So you really have to think about what is your disability and what is the likelihood of you getting well enough to work again within a year. If you're out of work a year, you're entitled to benefits for that year.
Okay.
In other words, so that's one thing people don't know. Social Security disability doesn't mean you have to be disabled for the rest of your life. If you're disabled for a year or more, you're entitled to benefits for that year. So we have a number of clients who will be out of work for a year. They go back and they're entitled to get benefits for that year they were out.
I see. Now, I've heard that basically you have to have absolutely nothing in order to qualify for benefits. But Matt, is that actually true?
It is not. That's one of those common misconceptions that we try to dispel in our book.
Yeah.
But if a person is, again, applying for Social Security disability insurance benefits where they paid into the system, then no, that any passive income, assets, that does not come into the equation. It's whether they're not working and they're disabled. But what they would probably heard is that the SSI, there is that financial part that they have to meet, where they have no real income and no major assets.
I see. What about dependents? Can they get benefits?
The dependents don't get them themselves. If, say, a person is, if they're disabled, they get a certain amount of money for all their dependents, wife, children, and dependents are someone they take care of, like their wife, if their wife is not working, or their children who are under 19 and in high school and not married. Okay. So, but they give them a certain amount. I think it's 50% of whatever their benefit is divided between their dependents.
Is it just as easy for a 30-year-old to get benefits as, say, someone who's 60 years old?
No.
Closer to 60, there's a grid that basically the older you get, the more consideration they give to the job you worked, to your education. The younger you are, it's a lot harder because they look at a 30-year-old and they expect them to be more robust, able to bounce back easier.
Right.
The one big exception to that, I would say, are mental health claims.
Right. Mental health claims often start when someone's young.
Right.
And so those, they recognize it's really not related to age at all. The judges feel more comfortable putting somebody on disability that's 60 who could retire in 2 years anyway. They take this seriously, and a 30-year-old, they really need to know this person cannot do anything. So yes, it's much harder for a 30-year-old, except for people that are paralyzed. I mean, it has to be pretty extreme.
Catastrophic. almost.
Catastrophic.
I see. How important is medical treatment in the equation?
It's the basis for which they be found disabled. So those are the claimants that we find have the hardest time, who don't have steady medical treatment, don't have doctors that can report their symptomatology. Social Security has a treating doctor rule, essentially, that they will give more weight to a claimant's treating doctor than to the Social Security's own doctor. So that becomes critical. If you have someone that's been treating you for a while that can really speak to the disabilities and how they affect you, that is great evidence. So for people who are not treating, it becomes a lot harder.
Or a lot of the people have only been able to get treatment, if any treatment at all, sometimes it's through a clinic. And the clinics are stretched so much that they really don't have the time a lot of times to document or to write letters in their behalf. So it's much more of a burden for people who don't have their own private medical care.
Yeah. If you just joined our program, we're here with attorneys Matthew Hill and Carol Ponton, and we're discussing their book, Ultimate Guide to Winning Your Social Security Disability Claim. You know, in another segment we talked about veterans. Can a veteran get Social Security in addition to VA benefits?
Absolutely, and that's a very good question because a lot of veterans don't realize that.
Right.
They think they're having to pick from one to the other, but they're two separate systems and you're entitled to both, absolutely.
There's still the offset in that if a veteran's getting service-connected compensation and he applies for supplemental security income, SSI, where there's that financial threshold, then there would be an offset there. But if the veteran is getting service-connected compensation and is paid into the system to get disability insurance benefits, then yeah, there's no offset. They can receive both.
So in other words, the VA has the same system Social Security has. They have a system where for Social Security, if you worked and paid into the system, you're covered. For the VA, if you were injured in the service and you're covered, they're paid, there's no offset. You can get both, okay? VA has a pension for veterans that have served during time of war who can't work. They want to make sure that no veteran is totally destitute that served during time of war. So their VA pension is similar to the SSI program.
What if you're not a veteran and can't afford treatment?
Well, that goes back to what Carol was talking about with clinics. They become harder to find, but there's clinics. But the catch goes back to what Carol said, in that they are typically so busy that they cannot fill out a form. They cannot really write, they can't really write extensive notes. They're there just for treatment and try to get the person in and out. So that's a great place to get care, but it still becomes tricky to get the documentation they need.
And unfortunately, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll just say, this person is disabled. That doesn't get you anything with Social Security. They need to know exactly why you're disabled. How do you know they're disabled? How long have you treated them? What's their problem? What's their limitation? And that's a pretty extensive letter, and these clinics don't have the time to do that.
Right, right.
Now, Social Security will send them out to their own doctor, but usually that's often they don't have the time either to really evaluate these people.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but Carol and Matthew, I want to thank you guys for dropping by. And to continue this discussion and to learn more about the topic, please visit our website and remember to pick up a volume of the new book, Ultimate Guide to Winning Your Social Security Disability Claim. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.